Part 98. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 972. Tang Ning originally planned to wait until Princess Anyang left the capital before telling her the truth. But judging from the current situation, if he doesn't reveal his identity, who knows whether she will take off her coat after taking off her cloak, what she will take off, and who knows what will happen next. Princess Anyang looked at him and asked, "What are you recruiting?" "Actually." Tang Ning looked at her, sighed softly, and said, "Actually, I am the leader of Xiaoan Kingdom." Princess Anyang's body trembled, and then the fire in her eyes extinguished, and she said disappointedly, "I don't blame you for not being able to help me, but you don't have to use such a reason to lie to me." Snapped. Tang Ning took out the royal seal from the drawer in the study, slapped it on the table, and said, "This is the royal seal of Xiaoan." Worried that Princess Anyang didn't know this thing, he explained in detail, "When I came back this time, I originally wanted to marry Xiaoman in a glamorous manner, but who knew that His Majesty had such a bad idea, and I didn't want to do this either." Princess Anyang looked straight at him and asked, "Are you the Princess of Xiaoan?" "It's true," Tang Ning said, "otherwise, do you think those Xiaoan envoys could change their minds so easily?" Princess Anyang thought for a while, and it seemed that those Xiaoan envoys had identified Princess Pingyang from the very beginning. Even His Majesty could not convince them, but Tang Ning easily made them change their minds. If Tang Ning is the leader of the Xiaoan kingdom, then all this will be explained. She looked at Tang Ning blankly and asked again, "Are you the leader of Xiaoan kingdom?" "I really am." Tang Ning nodded helplessly and comforted her, "So you don't have to worry." Princess Anyang's long-hanging heart was finally relieved. Then, a burst of deep anger and grievance surged in her heart. If he could have told her this earlier, why would she have shed those tears that she shouldn't have shed? She pinched Tang Ning's neck with both hands, shook her vigorously, and said through gritted teeth, "Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Tang Ning defended herself, "His Majesty cannot know about this matter. I am also considering the overall situation." Princess Anyang shed tears of grievance and choked with sobs, "Do you know how sad I am?" Tang Ning gave her a hug, patted her shoulder gently, and said, it's okay, it's all my fault. By the way, why did you come to see me tonight?" Princess Anyang's body stiffened, and her face instantly turned red. Does he need her to tell him now that she actually came to sacrifice herself tonight? Should she tell him that in her opinion, it would be better to leave her clean body to the man she likes than to marry a stranger she has never met? While she was filled with embarrassment and anger, another wave of annoyance arose in her heart. She opened her mouth and bit Tang Ning's shoulder. "Bite you to death, bite you to death." "Ah!" Tang Ning cried out in pain and hurriedly moved away, dissatisfied. "You are a dog." 2 bowls of noodles were placed in front of Tang Ning. She and Princess Anyang had 1 bowl each. In addition, there were a few side dishes and a pot of wine. Just now, when she was chasing Tang Ning to bite her, her stomach kept growling. After Tang Ning asked, she found out that she hadn't eaten since morning. So Tang Ning went to the kitchen herself and cooked 2 bowls of plain noodles, which Princess Anyang ate without any ladylike manner. Tang Ning did not eat, and his bowl was also prepared for Princess Anyang. He crossed his arms, looked at Princess Anyang, and asked, "By the way, what do you want to do here tonight?" "Anyway, tonight was already very embarrassing." Princess Anyang simply put down her chopsticks, looked at him, and asked, "Answer my question first. What is the problem? Do you like me?" Tang Ning picked up the chopsticks, took a bite of the food, and then took a sip of wine. She shook her head and said, "It's too strong for the wine, it's too hard for the wine." Princess Anyang snorted coldly and said, "If you are drunk, I can do whatever you want tonight." Tang Ning got up from the table and wondered if this was what the princess said. If a woman acts like a rogue, a man should also stay away. Then what do you think we should do? Tang Ning simply risked her life and said, I'll ask them to go to His Majesty and cancel the marriage. Isn't it okay if we don't marry the princess of Chen Kingdom? No. Princess Anyang said without hesitation, you begged to marry Princess Pingyang, but you took the initiative to reject me, Anyang. How do you want others to see me? Tang Ning was completely helpless and said, then what do you want? Princess Anyang said, you have ruined my life and my happiness. You must be responsible for me. Tang Ning had an in-depth discussion with her on how to be responsible for Princess Anyang. After signing the next series of unequal treaties, it was already very late. So Tang Ning had no choice but to leave her to rest in the Tang mansion. Early the next morning, the two of them opened the door at the same time, washed up, and went out to have breakfast together. Tang Ning and Princess Anyang walked out of the inner courtyard, and a figure stood in the courtyard outside, looking over them. Tang Ning was startled and suddenly woke up. She looked at old Zheng and asked, when did you come back? Lao Zheng looked away from Princess Anyang and said, half an hour ago. Of course, what Tang Ning wanted was not this answer. Old Zheng should be in the grassland now, leading the army of the western region, and the Sushan tribe and the Chenchu alliance to deal with the black barbarians. Logically, he should not be here. Without waiting for him to continue asking questions, old Zheng explained, the leader of the black barbarians has died on the battlefield. The coalition forces have captured tens of thousands of people. The rest are just a mob. It is only a matter of time to completely solve them, so I came back first. All this sounds a bit incredible. How powerful are the black barbarians? The Sushan tribe has been oppressed by them for dozens or hundreds of years. Now, less than a year has passed, and the black barbarians have almost been conquered by the Sushan people. It is really a bit fast. However, thinking about it carefully, it feels that it should be like this. After all, this time, it is the coalition forces of the four countries, and the reinforcements of the Sushan tribe are a full 300,000. Even if there is no Sushan tribe, these people are enough to sweep the grassland. In other words, in the near future, Wanyanyan will become the only queen on the grassland, controlling the most vast territory on this continent. Tang Ning saw that Lao Zheng's eyes occasionally glanced at Princess Anyang beside him, and explained, we. No need to explain. Lao Zheng glanced at him and said, I understand. Tang Ning knew that he was thinking wrong, and shook his head and said, you don't understand. Lao Zheng smiled and said nothing more. After breakfast, Tang Ning still planned to explain to Lao Zheng again. After all, this matter was just a misunderstanding. It would be bad if he talked about it in Gizhu later. As soon as he walked into Lao Zheng's room, he saw Lao Zheng lying on the ground with someone under him. A middle-aged woman. Sorry. Tang Ning turned around and walked outside, saying, I'm leaving now, you continue. The next moment, Lao Zheng appeared in front of him and explained, we are practicing swords, practicing swords. Tang Ning looked at him, nodded, and smiled, I understand. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 973. Lao Zheng came back from the grassland this time, and he actually brought back Wanyanyan's master. He said he was practicing swordsmanship, but how could he practice swordsmanship on others? Tang Ning understood Lao Zheng's hunger for being single for more than 10 years, so he patted his shoulder and said, practice in another place next time, the ground is dirty. Once the war on the grassland is over, if nothing unexpected happens, the several countries on this continent will be able to develop harmoniously and steadily. The court also learned about this matter soon. Officials looked into the future and seemed to have seen that Chen was about to enter a new era. In the next few years, although the four borders are stable, all countries are developing. If Chen is not careful, it will be left far behind by other countries. It can be regarded as an opportunity and a challenge. But if Chen seizes the opportunity, the ones who will be surpassed may be Chu and the western regions. Obviously, the officials of Chen are full of confidence in this. In the past few days, the officials have worked hard. Some seemingly trivial things on weekdays will also be magnified in this special situation. The most active, of course, is the imperial censorate. It would be fine in normal times. Considering that they are all colleagues, they would turn a blind eye to some minor things. But this time is different. When the whole Chen state is working hard to enter a new era, no one can be allowed to drag their feet. So, these days, the impeachment memorials submitted by the censors have increased. The impeachments in these memorials are nothing more than some crimes of abuse of power for personal gain and accepting bribes. They are not big or small. Tang Ning does not need to deal with them personally. He handed them all over to the officials below. In general, he has been living a leisurely life since he returned to the Shangshu province. At this moment, Tang Ning was sitting in the Shangshu yamen, drinking the good tea that Princess Anyang had looted from Prince Fu. He heard footsteps outside. He looked up and saw a figure walking in from outside. Seeing Zhou Mingli coming in, Tang Ning immediately stood up, poured him a cup of tea, and said, "Father-in-law, please." Zhou Mingli felt uncomfortable when his boss called him father-in-law, but he had almost gotten used to this feeling over the years. He took a sip of the teacup and handed a memorial to Tang Ning, saying, "Take a look at this memorial first." He would not show it to himself for ordinary trivial matters. Tang Ning took the memorial, opened it and looked at it, and a strange look appeared on his face. This memorial was written by an imperial censor. It said that the remnants of the Liang kingdom may have sneaked into the capital, and asked the court to investigate the matter strictly. The 4 words remnants of the Liang kingdom were not a good word in the Chen kingdom. The Jiangnan rebellion was provoked by them, so the court was extremely sensitive to these people. Once any clues were found, they would definitely investigate thoroughly. Tang Ning had also suspected that those people were lurking in the capital. After all, the poison that Emperor Chen was poisoned with was only found in Guizhou. Unfortunately, they did not get anything out of the Tang family, and the matter was eventually left unresolved. The censors were originally reporting on hearsay, and many things did not require any evidence. Many of their memorials were directly ignored by the Shangshu province, but this matter should be treated seriously even if there was no evidence. Zhou Mingli looked at him and said, "This matter is very serious. The Shangshu province cannot make a decision. Should we take it to His Majesty?" His father-in-law had been in the Shangshu province for so long, and he had obviously developed some keen political sense. Tang Ning nodded and said, "Let's pass this memorial to His Majesty." For his own life, Emperor Chen had long since stopped fighting as hard as before. However, he did not completely ignore the affairs of the court. If there were any major events in the court that the officials could not decide, they had to be presented to him. Emperor Chen's hatred for the remnants of the Liang kingdom was beyond Tang Ning's expectations. It was only half an hour after the memorial was submitted that the palace issued a notice. Regarding the Liang kingdom remnant, Emperor Chen ordered all the major government offices and secret agents in the capital to investigate with all their strength. Even if they had to dig 3 feet underground, they would find them out. It seems that the Jiangnan incident has left a big shadow in Emperor Chen's heart, but Tang Ning did not pay much attention to it. In his eyes, Baijin and Gong Sunying were just stray dogs who could not make any waves. It would be better if they could hide in a place where no one could find them, hide their identities, and live a peaceful life for the rest of their lives. If they still want to do something, Tang Ning doesn't mind making them completely desperate. Prince Huai's mansion. It is rumored that the remnants of Liang state are hiding in the capital, and there is already a panic outside. Baijin looked at King Huai, a little exasperated, and said angrily, "What is going on?" "You shouldn't ask me about this matter," King Huai said indifferently. This matter was reported by the censorate and directly submitted to my father by the Ministry of Shangshu. The reason why the court has such a big reaction is also the order of my father. He glanced at Bai Jin and said, "You should ask your people when the news leaked out, instead of asking me here." Bai Jin looked at King Huai and asked, "Besides you, who else knows about us?" King Huai looked at her and asked, "Are you doubting me?" Bai Jin took a deep breath and said slowly, "I just remind you that we are grasshoppers tied to the same rope. If something happens to us, you will not be much better." King Huai said, "You don't need to remind me of this. I know it better than you. Don't forget that my life is still in your hands." Bai Jin's expression softened slightly and he said, "In that case, you can help us solve this matter." King Huai glanced at her and asked, "Do you want me to die with you and collude with the rest of Lianguo's party? Do you think my father will let me go?" Bai Jin looked gloomy and said, "If we let them continue searching like this, we will be exposed sooner or later, and when the time comes, you won't be able to escape." This was a naked threat. Bai Jin's meaning was very clear. If the Chen court found them, they would definitely expose King Huai. However, King Huai didn't mind at all and said, "In order not to attract other people's attention, I can't help you openly. These days, the court will conduct strict searches in the capital, and any suspicious people will be interrogated. You can no longer appear in the open. Come on, I have a secret courtyard in the capital. You can hide there first and wait until the news passes before coming out. During this period, I will have people send you all the things you need. In addition, I will try my best to take over the search and help you avoid this disaster." Bai Jin thought for a long time and finally nodded. This is the capital of Chen State. No matter how conceited she is, she doesn't think she can escape the Chen State's dragnet search. After King Huai told her the address of the villa, Bai Jin left the study. She walked to the door, paused again, looked back at King Huai, and said, "You'd better pray that nothing happens to us, otherwise, you only have half a year to live." After that, she left without looking back. King Huai looked out the window, a smile appeared on his face, and said, "How can I use half a year?" There was no fear of death in his eyes, but only deep exhaustion and relief. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 974. Chapter 969 of the main text of the Ruyi Little Man, seeking the skin of a tiger. Chen Huang deeply hates the remnants of the Liang Kingdom. Starting a few days ago, the capital has entered a state of martial law. Regardless of whether they are leaving or entering the city, the procedures are extremely cumbersome. Anyone who cannot produce proof of identity will be immediately taken back to the yamen and questioned in detail. Of course, the capital of Chen State is home to hundreds of thousands of people. In addition to the slums, there are also many wealthy families. If you really want to hide a few people, it is not that easy to find them. This kind of strict inspection is a big burden for both the court and the people. If they can't find those people within a month at most, they can only let it go. This is the capital. In this matter, Jing Zheyin has the heaviest burden on his shoulders. Fortunately, his father-in-law has already entered the Shangshu province, so he doesn't have to bear so much pressure. In addition to Jing Zheyin, King Huai also has a lot of responsibilities. I don't know why. 2 days ago, Emperor Chen asked him to be responsible for searching for the remaining members of Lianguo. No matter who is behind them, they must be uprooted. To eliminate the chaos in the capital. From a certain perspective, King Huai is actually quite tragic. He has the ability. During the period when Emperor Chen left the government, many difficult matters in the government were settled by his hands. However, even if he did these things well, he would not get any reward. Everyone knows that the prince that His Majesty likes most is the gradually growing Prince Run. His regard for Prince Huai is only superficial. King Huai didn't seem to care about this and continued to do these thankless things without any complaints. Not only the officials in the court, but also the people in the capital had a very high opinion of King Huai. He is like a diligent scalper who never competes or robs, and does his job in obscurity. Perhaps it is for this reason that among the three princes in the court, he is the only one left now. 1. It stands to reason that he is the best candidate for the crown prince, whether in terms of character, talent, or in the order of eldest son. However, many things in this world are not taken for granted. No one expected that King Run would come to everyone's attention so quickly. With concubine Fang Shu's favor and the support of the Fang family, even if King Huai was in front of him, it's far from enough. When Tang Ning, Xiao Xiao and Princess Anyang were walking on the street, they could clearly feel that the flow of people on the street was much smaller than before. Princess Anyang and Xiao Xiao originally went out for shopping, but after they came out, they discovered that due to the atmosphere in Beijing in recent days, many shops on the street were closed, which made them a little disappointed. Princess Anyang curled her lips and said with some dissatisfaction, "When will the martial law end? The capital cannot continue like this. The business of the shops has dropped by half these days. If it continues like this, it will have to be closed first." Tang Ning said, "By the time the remaining members of Liang Guo's party are caught, even if they are not caught, the court will give up within half a month at most." Speaking of the remnants of the Liang kingdom, Princess Anyang became a little angry and said, "They are restoring their country, why are they causing trouble here?" The people in Beijing also had the same idea as Princess Anyang. Because of the affairs of Liang Guo's remaining party, the capital was really disturbed and it greatly affected the lives of the people. Everyone hopes that His Highness King Huai can find those people as soon as possible and restore peace to the capital. At the same time, in a remote courtyard somewhere in Beijing, a carriage slowly stopped in front of the courtyard gate. A servant got off the carriage and moved the food and other items on the carriage into the yard. He looked at the several figures standing in the courtyard and said, "This place has been searched. No one will come in a short time. There is enough food here. During this time, you should not go out." After everything was unloaded from the carriage, Bai Jing closed the courtyard door, and Gong Sun Ying stepped forward and asked, "Can King Huai be trusted?" Bai Jin said, "He is in the same boat as us. If something happens to us, he won't survive. He is a smart man. I don't think he will do anything stupid." King Wu looked at Bai Jin with a smile on his face and said, "It's all thanks to Elder Bai's hard work." Bai Jin didn't speak, but felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. All the arrangements and plans she had made in Beijing over the years were not originally for King Wu, but unfortunately after the death of King Qian and the crown prince, he had no second choice except King Wu. King Wu looked at the two men and said, "I hope this person can take action soon. If he becomes the emperor, we will have an emperor's puppet. By then, there is no need to let him help restore the country. We can first seize Chen country, and then directly send troops to Guizhou." Bai Jin frowned and said, "This is not our plan." Although he thought about using the power of King Huai after he became emperor to help them restore the country, he never thought that he could directly seize the Chen kingdom. King Wu showed a smile on his face and said, "Plans will always change. When he first cooperated with us, he should have realized that he was seeking skin from a tiger." Bai Jin wanted to remind him that King Huai was also a tiger, seeking skin from a tiger. Even she herself couldn't tell who was the tiger. However, looking at King Wu's ambitious look, he finally shut his mouth. At this time, in the palace of Prince Huai and Prince Fu were sitting in the pavilion, with a chessboard in front of them. King Fu picked up a chess piece but did not drop it. He asked, "What should I do with the poison in your body?" King Huai said, "Don't worry, I've already figured out a way." King Fu asked, What are you going to do after getting rid of the remnants of Liang? King Huai put down a chess piece and said, it's been more than 20 years. It's time to seek justice for my mother and the queen. King Fu picked up another chess piece and thought for a long time, but didn't put it down. He put the chess piece back and said, he won't agree. King Huai looked up at him and said, why should he agree? Cough, cough. It was late at night, and several heavy coughs were heard in the Yangshen Hall of the Imperial Palace. Wei Jian walked forward with a piece of clothing and said, Your Majesty, the weather is cold, please put on another piece of clothing. Emperor Chen put on an outer coat and asked, how is the investigation of the remnants of Liang state going? Wei Jian said, His Royal Highness Prince Huai is investigating, but there is no result yet. What are the spies doing? Emperor Chen frowned and said, the group of Liang rebels have already touched my nose, but they don't know anything at all. What's the point of keeping them? Your Majesty, calm down. Wei Jian said hurriedly, Your Royal Highness has found some clues. As soon as he finished speaking, hurried footsteps came from outside. A young eunuch pushed the door open and said, Your Majesty, His Royal Highness Prince Huai has found the hiding place of those Liang rebels and is taking 3,000 golden feather guards to capture them. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 975. These days, the capital has become a place of panic because of the Liang remnant. In the short moment when Tang Ning and Xiao Xiao were watching the stars in the courtyard, two groups of patrolling guards ran by outside. Xiao Xiao looked up at the bright stars in the sky and asked, Brother, Mother once said that after people die, they will become stars in the sky and watch us from the sky. Is that right? Maybe. Tang Ning didn't have the heart to expose the girl's fantasy. He told her that the stars in the sky are actually huge air masses, which rely on the balance of outward radiation pressure and inward gravity generated by internal nuclear fusion reactions to maintain stability. He also didn't tell her that there is no Chang'e and Osman thus tree on the moon. It is just a big rock with potholes. Tang Ning walked over, gently touched her head, and asked, Do you miss home? Xiao Xiao shook her head and said, This is my home. Tang Ning was very satisfied with her answer. He also hoped that Xiao Xiao would regard this place as her home. Some cruel things had happened to her before, and Tang Ning hoped to help her slowly heal the trauma in her heart here. Tang Ning was about to speak, but suddenly found that a certain night sky in the distance lit up without warning. Xiao Xiao also looked in that direction and said in surprise, There's a fire over there. That's not a fire. Tang Ning shook his head and said, That's someone shooting arrows. Tang Ning had led soldiers before, and he knew what a rocket salvo looked like. From the dark red, countless tiny flames could be seen. Tang Ning could guess at a glance that there were no less than 300 archers there. And in a team, the number of archers only accounted for a small part, which shows that there were at least 2,000 people there. In the capital, the only ones who could gather so many archers after nightfall were the Golden Feather Guards. With so many Golden Feather Guards dispatched, combined with the movements in the capital in recent days, it is not difficult to guess that the remnants of the Liang kingdom must have been discovered. The fire lit up the sky, but that place was far away from here. Tang Ning looked at it for a while and then prepared to go back to his room to sleep. What happened there? There will be news tomorrow. However, just as he was about to go back to his room, a servant reported that the Golden Feather Guards were knocking on the door outside. When Tang Ning arrived at the gate of the mansion, a general of the Golden Feather Guard immediately bowed and said, Greetings, Prime Minister Tang. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, What happened? The young general said, We found the traces of the remnants of the Liang kingdom, but during the encirclement and suppression, several of them escaped. Those people fled in this direction. Prime Minister Tang must be more careful tonight. Tang Ning nodded and said, Thank you for the reminder. With Lao Zheng and Wanyan Yan's master here, if the remnants of the Liang kingdom really dare to come, they will just fall into the trap, so there is no need to worry. After the young general reminded Tang Ning, he bowed and said, Prince Tang, be careful, I will go to search for them. After sending away these golden feather guards, Tang Ning closed the door of the mansion and returned to his yard. Bang! Just as he stepped into the yard, there was a muffled sound in front of him. Tang Ning looked over with vigilance and saw two more figures in the yard. Gong Sun Ying was covered in blood, with a person on her back. Bai Jin stood beside her, looking equally miserable, with half of her sleeves burned, emitting a pungent smell. Almost at the same time as they jumped down from the wall, the figures of Lao Zheng and the middle-aged woman also quickly appeared in the courtyard. The next moment, Xiao Xiao also stood beside Tang Ning. Tang Ning narrowed his eyes and said, It's you. Bai Jin looked at Tang Ning and said anxiously, We were discovered by the Chen court. For Mayor's sake, save us. Before Tang Ning could speak, the middle-aged man on Gong Sun Ying's back suddenly shouted, Elder Bai, Elder Gong Sun, kill them quickly. Shut up, Bai Jin's face changed drastically, and he shouted, and was about to say something to Tang Ning, but it was too late. Tang Ning looked at the middle-aged man on Gong Sun Ying's back and asked with a smile, Who do you want to kill? Bai Jin said hurriedly, This is a misunderstanding. Tang Ning said, Old Zheng, tie them up and send them to the Golden Feather Guard. Bai Jin and Gong Sun Ying were about to take action, but their bodies suddenly trembled, as if they were stared at by a ferocious beast, and they dared not even move. Gong Sun Ying felt more pressure from Lao Zheng than before. She raised her head and gritted her teeth and said, Tang Ning, he is His Royal Highness the King of Wu. He doesn't know your identity. If you let us go this time, we will definitely repay you 100-fold in the future. Let you go, Tang Ning sneered and said, then let you go to Kandy to make trouble. What are you thinking? Since you have come to my door this time, I will not be polite. Bai Jin looked at him and said loudly, For the grace of saving Mayor's life and raising her, please let His Royal Highness the King of Wu go this time. Tang Ning said expressionlessly, Lao Zheng, tie him up. Lao Zheng went to the woodshed to get a rope and came to the three people, but did not take action. Instead, he stood there and looked up. At the same time, the middle-aged woman also looked over and pulled out two scimitars from her waist, as if facing a great enemy. Tang Ning looked along the line of sight of the two people and found a figure standing on the courtyard wall in front of him. The figure was completely shrouded in a black robe. Even though there were lights on all around the Tang family's courtyard, the face underneath the black robe could not be seen clearly. Junior sister Bai, junior sister Gong Sun, you haven't made any progress in all these years. The figure stood on the courtyard wall, and an old voice came from under the black robe. It should be a woman from the voice, and she is not young. Unexpectedly, they have accomplices who escaped. Tang Ning looked at Lao Zheng and was about to ask him to catch the man together, but Lao Zheng's eyes were fixed on that direction and said in a deep voice, Master Tang, you take Xiao Xiao first and go to find the Golden Feather Guard. Tang Ning took a step to the side, and his face became solemn. He had never seen Lao Zheng so serious. He asked him and Xiao Xiao to go first, which meant that in his heart, even if he and Wan Yanyan's master joined forces, they would not be able to defeat this person. Tang Ning held Xiao Xiao's hand and was about to leave. The next moment, the hair on his body stood up, because in just a blink of an eye, the figure who was standing on the courtyard wall just now suddenly appeared in front of him. Almost at the same moment, two knife lights appeared in the courtyard. Tang Ning saw the swords flashing in the courtyard, but the figure seemed to be strolling in the garden, and casually dodged the joint attack of old Zheng and the middle-aged woman. Bang! Bang! After two muffled sounds, the figure took a step back. Old Zheng and the middle-aged woman took several steps back before they could stop. The figure who defeated the two people with a crushing force did not continue to attack, but stood in place, looking at old Zheng, and exclaimed, After many years, General Zheng's swordsmanship has become more refined. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 976. Zheng, General Zheng. When Bai Jin and Gong Sun Ying heard the words of the black-robed old woman, their bodies shook at the same time, as if they thought of something. They suddenly looked at old Zheng and said in unison, "General Zheng, you are General Zheng." Gong Sun Ying looked at him with a look of surprise on his face and murmured, "I should have thought of it earlier, I should have thought of it earlier." Then, they realized what the man in black robe had just called them. Bai Jin looked at her, confused. You are the senior sister, are you still alive?" The man in black robe took off his black robe, revealing an old face. Plop. Bai Jin looked at her, his legs softened, and he knelt on the ground. "Mommy." Behind Tang Ning, a figure flew out and hugged the old woman tightly. The old woman looked at Xiao Xiao, with a soft look on her face, touched her long hair, and said with a smile, "We haven't seen each other for so many years, and the princess has grown as tall as me." Tang Ning stood there, staring blankly in front of her. She couldn't digest so much information at once, and she was a little confused. They called Lao Zheng General Zheng. Bai Jin and Gong Sun Ying also knew his identity, so it was obvious which country he was a general from. This old woman is the senior sister of Bai Jin and Gong Sun Ying, also the senior sister of the 10th line of Wangu section. It is said that this person has extremely high martial arts skills and is loyal to the Liang royal family. She has disappeared since the fall of Qian Liang. And Xiao Xiao calls her nanny. Tang Ning knows that Xiao Xiao has a nanny, but she got lost when she was a child. So the nanny she talks about is the senior sister of Wangu sect? Wait, what did she call Xiao Xiao just now, princess? Tang Ning looked at Xiao Xiao again, then at Lao Zheng, Bai Jin, and Gong Sun Ying. She seemed to have understood something, but did not speak again. The Liang royal family was destroyed by the rebels, and the emperor, queen, and prince were all brutally killed. Xiaoxiu's parents died when he was young, and he was raised by a nanny. No wonder she didn't want to stay in Guizhou. Tang Ning originally thought it was because she couldn't adapt to the climate there, but in fact it was because she had extremely painful memories there. "Princess," Bai Jin looked happy when he heard this and asked, "What, the princess is still alive?" "The princess is still alive, but unfortunately, your majesty, the empress, and the prince all died in the hands of the traitors." The old woman looked at King Wu and asked indifferently, "Your Highness, you saw that the princess is still alive, what are you doing?" "Not very disappointed." "How could it be?" King Wu said with a dry smile on his face, "Xiao Xiao is still alive. As an uncle, it's too late for me to be happy. How could I be disappointed?" A hint of sarcasm appeared on the old woman's face, and she asked, "Happy, are you so happy that you want to kill her as soon as you meet her?" King Wu trembled and said, "Misunderstanding, this is all a misunderstanding." The old woman looked at him with a solemn tone, and asked, "Then you also misunderstood what happened when you lured the rebels into the palace and plotted to usurp the throne?" Bai Jin looked at him blankly and asked, "King Wu, is this true?" Gong Sun Ying also stared at him, with shock, disappointment, and disbelief in his eyes. King Wu's face turned completely pale and he said in a trembling voice, "How could I conspire to usurp the throne? If I conspired to usurp the throne, how could I be in such a situation now?" The old woman sneered and said, "That's because even you yourself didn't think that from beginning to end, you were just a pawn in the hands of the rebels." At this point, her tone had completely cooled down, and Sun Yan said, "Xiao Yu, you colluded with the rebels and conspired to rebel. I have been looking for you for so many years, but I didn't expect that you would actually be hiding in the capital of Chen State." From the old woman's words, King Wu heard a strong murderous intention. His face was pale and bloodless, and his whole body was shaking like chaff. He said quickly, "Elder Gong Sun, save me." He stopped abruptly before he finished speaking, because a skinny hand had already pinched his neck. Gong Sunying's expression changed drastically, and he immediately said, "Senior sister, don't." Click. She only said half of what she said when there was a crisp sound in her ears. King Wu's head dropped to the side weakly, his eyes were rounded, and he could no longer breathe. The old woman was decisive, and broke his neck without leaving any room. The old woman let go of her hand, and King Wu's body fell to the ground. She looked in the direction of Kizhu and murmured, "Your Majesty, Queen, I have avenged you." Gong Sunying looked at the body of King Wu lying on the ground, her pupils gradually losing their luster. She stayed there for a long time, then slowly squatted down and closed his eyes. Gong Sunying's eyes were blank and he said, "It turns out that I have been helping the evildoers for so many years." Bai Jin looked at her and opened his mouth, "Junior sister." Gong Sunying looked at Bai Jin and said, "Senior sister, after I die, please bury us together." Bai Jin's expression changed drastically, "No." However, before she finished speaking, Gong Sunying snorted, and a trace of blood spilled from the corner of her mouth. She leaned on King Wu's body and gradually fell silent. Bai Jin's body swayed, tears streaming down his face, and he murmured, "Why are you so stupid?" The old woman looked at Gong Sunying's body, and a trace of sadness flashed in her eyes. She hugged Xiao Xiao, who was standing there with a pale face, and whispered, "It's okay, it's okay." King Wu and Gong Sunying died, and Xiao Xiao reunited with her relatives. Tang Ning received so much information tonight that she couldn't describe her feelings at the moment. When the old woman comforted Xiao Xiao, he shook his head and turned to walk towards the room, intending to leave this place to them. When Xiao Xiao saw Tang Ning's back, her face immediately turned pale. She ran over quickly, hugged him from behind, and said in panic, "Brother, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to lie to you, don't leave me." Tang Ning's body trembled, slowly turned around, gently wiped the tears from her face, and smiled, "Silly girl, there are some things you want to say, if you don't want to say it, don't say it. Whether you are a little beggar or a princess of Liang, you are my sister, don't cry, your face will be bruised if you cry again." Xiao Xiao wiped her tears and said, "I'll tell you everything." The facts are the same as Tang Ning guessed. Xiaoxiu's identity is the former princess of Liang. After the demise of Liang, the eldest sister of Wangu sect, that is, the nanny in his mouth, took her out and came to Chen. Later, Xiao Xiao accidentally lost contact with her and lived a displaced life until she met Tang Ning. She held Tang Ning's hand tightly and said, "Brother, actually my name is Xiao Xiao." Tang Ning felt her nervousness and let her hold her hand. He looked at Lao Zheng and asked, "What's wrong with you? Did you know Xiaoxiu's identity a long time ago, so you came to the Tang family?" "It was just a coincidence," Lao Zheng smiled and said, "I also saw her at the Tang family by chance, so I stayed." Tang Ning finally understood why everyone in the family was kind to Xiao Xiao, but only the old beggar and Lao Zheng were kind to her differently than others. The old beggar was her master, so it was natural for him to treat her well. Although she had no relationship with him, old Zheng also protected her in every way. After the war on the grassland was over, he came directly to the capital without even having time to see his daughter. Xiao Xiao looked at old Zheng and asked in surprise, "General Zheng, haven't you already?" Old Zheng looked at her and smiled, "Thanks to the Queen's rescue, my family was able to survive." Most of Tang Ning's doubts were now resolved. He wanted to ask something else, but at this moment, there was another knock on the door. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 977. Tang Ning opened the door and saw King Huai standing outside the door. Behind him were more than 100 golden feather guards. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Why did your highness come to Tang Mansion late at night?" King Huai said, "The rest of Liang's party was chased here by the Jinyue. They didn't disturb Prime Minister Tang, right?" Tang Ning asked, "You mean Gong Sunying and King Wu?" "Unfortunately, they have already disturbed us." King Huai asked, "Tang Xiang has seen them, where are they now?" Dead. Tang Ning said, "He broke into the Tang family's house at night, jumped over the wall, and clamored to kill someone. He was killed by my guards as an assassin. The body is inside. Your Highness, please have someone carry it away as soon as possible. Don't be scared." To the child. King Huai looked at the Jinyue behind him and said, "Hurry up and go in." A moment later, outside the Tang mansion, King Huai looked at the two corpses lying on the ground. After a long time, he looked at Tang Ning and asked, "There are 3 remaining members of the Liang kingdom who escaped. I wonder if Prime Minister Tang has seen the third party, people." Tang Ning shook her head and said, "No." King Huai looked at him and said, "That man's strength should not be underestimated. Prime Minister Tang should be more careful. If anything unusual happens, Prime Minister Tang please notify Jinyue in time." Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "My bodyguard is not a vegetarian. If he dares to seek revenge, I will keep him safe until he comes back." King Huai cupped his hands and said, "Then I will not disturb you. Your Highness, walk slowly." Tang Ning closed the door and returned to her yard. She looked at Bai Jin and said, "After the imperial court has disposed of the corpses of Gong Sunying and King Wu, we will go to the mass grave to find them. From now on, we will not owe each other anything. You take care of yourself. Gong Sunying and King Wu are dead. Bai Jin is Sumei's master. Although she has used Sumei for more than 10 years, she has indeed saved her life and raised her. Tang Ning saved her life this time. From today on, Tang Ning and Sumei no longer owe each other anything. Since the death of King Qian, Bai Jin's desire to restore her country has weakened a lot. Now that Gong Sunying and King Wu have died, her heart is filled with despair." The old woman looked at her and said, "You should stay with me from now on." Bai Jin bowed and said respectfully, "Yes, senior sister." Bai Jin appeared here, and Tang Ning happened to have some questions to ask her. He looked at Bai Jin and asked, "Did you give the poison that the Tang family gave His Majesty?" Bai Jin nodded and said, "That's the calming incense developed by the 4th elder." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "It turns out you are really behind the Tang family." Bai Jin shook his head and said, "No, behind the Tang family is King Huai. Of course, the Tang family didn't know this until their death." Tang Ning's eyes narrowed slightly and she asked, "What did you say?" Their dream of restoring the country had been completely shattered. Although she didn't know why King Huai wanted to kill them all regardless of his own life, there was no need for her to hide this matter any longer. Since there was no need to hide anything, Bai Jin simply poured the beans into the bamboo tube and continued, "King Kong rebelled, King Duan rebelled, and both have the shadow of King Huai behind them. Not only that, King Huai will rebel soon." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "So, you have been cooperating with King Huai all this time?" Bai Jin nodded and said, "We started cooperating with King Huai 10 years ago." Tang Ning shook her head. "Those who don't know are fearless. With their little intelligence, cooperating with King Huai is like seeking the skin of a tiger and having to help count the money after being sold. They will be reduced to where they are today." Tang Ning has no idea at all. Accident. Although it seems incredible that King Huai would rebel, it is actually expected. Tang Ning had known for a long time that King Huai was not as harmless as he seemed. On the contrary, he was the most dangerous and deepest among all the princes. A prince who doesn't want to be an emperor is not a good prince, and indeed, King Huai is no exception. Tang Ning always felt that King Huai's purpose was more than that simple, but even he could never see through King Huai. Bai Jin couldn't believe Bai Jin's words, but she couldn't believe them all. Tang Ning still planned to stay put and closely observe King Huai's movements first. At this time, he immediately thought of Emperor Chen. If King Huai really wanted to rebel, then Emperor Chen would be the only emperor in the Chen kingdom who had 3 consecutive sons rebel against him. In all dynasties, I dare not say that there have been no such attempts, but it is definitely unprecedented. If you include Zhao Yuan, who is stupid and cute, and seems to only deceive girls, but in fact has secretly controlled most of the court, his tragedy will be even higher. Add to this the fact that he seems to be the prime minister of the Chen kingdom, but is actually the leader of the Zhuoan kingdom, and his favorite minister plots against him at every turn, and his tragedy will have 2 more layers. Ordinary people would collapse long ago if they endured such blows one after another. It's late at night. Jin Yue dispatched 3,000 people this time and killed most of Liang Guo's remaining party members on the spot. The 3 people who broke out and ran out were also killed on the spot because they broke into Tang Xiang's mansion. As for the last person, Jin Yue searched for Tianming in the capital, but he still couldn't find it. It was already daybreak. In Prince Huai's mansion, a young general walked to Prince Huai's study and said, "Your Highness, I still haven't found it." King Huai waved his hand and said, "No need to look for it, let the brothers go back and rest." The young general showed a look of shame on his face and said, "Your Highness, all generals are incompetent." King Huai said, "It's okay. The 2 main criminals have been brought to justice. Your Majesty will not blame you." The young man retreated guiltily. After a moment, King Fu hurried in from outside and asked, "One of them ran away?" King Huai nodded and said, "Bai Jin was not captured." "Isn't that a big deal?" Prince Fu's expression changed drastically and he said, "Hurry up and pack your things and leave the capital." King Huai waved his hand and said, "I let them go on purpose, but I didn't expect that Gong Sunying and King Wu would die in the Tang mansion, but it's enough for Bai Jin to stay." King Fu looked at him and murmured, "Is this also part of your plan?" King Huai did not deny it and said, "Bai Jin is the master of Sumei, the most beautiful woman in the capital, and Tang Ning is her husband. When Bai Jin has no way to escape, he will definitely turn to him for help." Prince Fu looked anxious and asked, "But if this happens, won't Bai Jin tell him about you?" King Huai smiled and said, "Of course she can." King Fu was a little angry and asked, "Are you crazy? You will fail and end up like King Kong and King Duan." King Huai looked at him, shook his head and said, "I have never wanted to be emperor, and I am not afraid that they will know that I want to rebel." King Fu looked at him and said angrily, "If you are destined to fail, why are you doing all this?" King Huai said calmly, "In order to let him know, even if his 3 sons rebel against him, it is far from the end." Before Tang Ning could recover from the news that King Huai was rebellious, she was shocked by another news. Some days ago, the Queen Mother and Princess Pingyang, who went to the south of the Yangtze River to relax, returned to the capital today. The old beggar has only been away for a few days. Even if he travels day and night, he is still on his way to Jiangnan, and going to Jiangnan and returning to the capital are not the same road at all. In other words, Tang Ning's plan to secretly take away Zhao Man by using an old beggar had just begun and she declared bankruptcy. This also means that sooner or later, he will have to face Emperor Chen head-on. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 978. These days, the capital was under full martial law because of the rebellion caused by the remnants of Liang Guo's party, which made people panic and the atmosphere was extremely tense. This morning, good news finally came. Last night, His Highness King Huai led the Jin Yue to find the hiding place of Liang Guo's remaining party, and caught the opponent by surprise with lightning speed. The remnants of Liang Guo's party were indeed quite capable. They actually managed to tear a hole through Jin Yue's encirclement and several people escaped. It's just that those few people may have been destined to die. By coincidence, they broke into the residence of Prime Minister Tang. They were treated as assassins and killed on the spot by the guards of Prime Minister Tang's mansion. Even Qian Liang's none of the royal family ran away. At this point, the matter of Liang Guo's remaining party was finally settled, and peace was restored to the capital. For this, King Huai received a commendation from His Majesty. The imperial court withdrew the strict interrogation. The Jinya Wei patrolling everywhere in the capital was no longer visible. The people in the capital were also freed from the tense atmosphere, and the atmosphere in the capital suddenly became lively. Tang Mansion. The old beggar came back early today and expressed his great disdain for Tang Ning's intelligence capabilities. Although he got news on the way that the Queen Mother and Princess Pingyang had returned to Beijing, he still failed to catch up with them despite traveling day and night. Tang Ning looked at the old beggar and asked, "How likely are you to steal someone from the palace?" The old beggar glared at him angrily and said, "I am a man, not a god. If the palace was so easy to enter and exit, your emperor would have died 100 times. He complained about Tang Ning and ignored him. He opened his arms, looked at Xiao Xiao walking out of the yard, and said with a smile, "My good disciple, do you miss master?" Before Xiao Xiao could fly over, a figure stopped in front of her. The old woman looked at the old beggar and asked, "Are you her master?" The old beggar looked at her warily and asked, "Who are you?" Without any warning, the old woman reached out and grabbed his throat and said, "I want to see what you are capable of being her master." The old beggar dodged her claws, snorted coldly, and said, "Old guy, if you dare to doubt me, I will let you see what I am capable of." The more people she met, the more Tang Ning realized what it meant to have someone outside the world. There was the old noodle seller in front of her, and the senior sister from the 10,000 Gu sect behind her. Both of them were actually able to compete with the old beggar, allowing him to take advantage of her. Less than a little cheaper. Of course, it is not easy for them to take advantage of the old beggar. The old beggar and the old woman were going back and forth, and it was hard to tell the winner for a while. A quarter of an hour later, the old beggar waved to stop and said, "Do you want to continue the fight?" The old woman glanced at him and finally withdrew her hand. In just a quarter of an hour, she had already understood the strength of the person in front of her, and knew that he, like herself, was already at the pinnacle of martial arts in the world. If they want to decide the winner, it must be a life and death fight, which is not her original intention. The old beggar glanced at her and asked, "Why, do I have the skills to be my good disciple's master?" The old woman didn't speak, which was regarded as acquiescence. Xiao Xiao was frightened yesterday and is feeling better now. She looked at the old beggar and said, "Master, this is Nanny. Without Nanny, I would have died long ago and would never have met master." A look of guilt appeared on the old woman's face, and she said, "I failed your majesty and your empress trust and caused the princess to suffer so much." Xiao Xiao held Tang Ning's arm and said, "I'm not suffering at all. I've been living a good life these past few years." The old beggar discovered something. He looked at Xiao Xiao and asked, "Princess, what princess?" Xiao Xiao stuck out her tongue at him and said sheepishly, "I'm sorry, master, I didn't mean to hide it from you." Soon, the old beggar opened his mouth wide and murmured, "I didn't expect that my precious disciple is actually the Princess of Liang. I remembered that the former Liang royal family seemed to have the surname Xiao. It's a pity that someone gave it to." As the old beggar was talking, he realized something, slammed the table, and said angrily, "Damn it, who were the rebels at that time? They dared to bully my good disciple. Tell master, master will help you kill them all." The old woman said calmly, "Except for the Haoliang royal family who are now in Dian, all those who participated in the rebellion are dead." Listening to the old woman's voice, Tang Ning couldn't help but get goosebumps all over her body. Although she was old, she was not merciless at all when she started killing people. King Wu didn't even have time to fart before he was crushed to death by her with one hand. Such a clean and neat technique, she had died in these years. There will definitely be no shortage of people on hand. Xiao Xiao shook her head, held Tang Ning's hand tightly, and said, "What happened in the past is in the past. I'm living a good life now and I'm no longer a princess." The old woman looked at her and said, "The princess has grown up. No matter what the princess decides, I will obey the princess." "What are you afraid of?" The old beggar curled his lips and said disdainfully, "Isn't it just a small backbone? Don't worry, good disciple, the master will avenge you." The old beggar has a habit of protecting his disciples. I am afraid that as long as he nods his head, he can run thousands of miles to the land of Yunnan and tear off the head of the emperor of the later Liang dynasty and play it as a ball. Xiao Xiao looked at him, shook his head and said, "These things have happened for a long time, and I don't want anyone to die because of me anymore." Although the old beggar and the old woman were both top-notch masters in the world, they both followed the small decision and said nothing more after hearing the words. However, Tang Ning knew that even if they didn't take the initiative to provoke Ho Liang was already eyeing candy. This battle would have to happen sooner or later. It was just that now they had another reason. Regardless of whether it is the king of Kizhu or the king of Wu, their reasons for restoring the country are not as sufficient as Xiao Xiaolei's. King Qian and King Wu are just princes from the sidelines. In comparison, Xiao Xiao is the real Lianguo. Royalty. The matter of restoring the country was suppressed for the time being. Xiao Xiao and her grandma reunited after a long absence. They seemed particularly excited and had endless things to say. Tang Ning entered the palace openly on the grounds of giving the princess a physical checkup. After relieving the Queen Mother's illness, detoxifying Chen Huang, and becoming the chief consultant of the Queen Mother Hospital, it became easy for him to meet Zhao Man. Changning Palace. After shooing away the eunuchs and palace maids and closing the palace door, she snuggled into Tang Ning's arms. The two of them flirted with each other for a while before she remembered something and said with lingering fear, "I was scared to death. I didn't hear about it until I returned to the palace." Envoy Wan actually proposed to his father. Fortunately, his father did not agree, but Sister Anyang. At this point, she looked a little angry and said, "Sister Anyang definitely doesn't want to marry someone from the western regions. That bastard king married a princess from the Chu kingdom and wants to marry someone from the Chen kingdom." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "There is something I want to tell you." Zhao Man raised his head, blinked, and asked, "What happened?" Tang Ning opened her mouth and said, "Actually, I am that bastard." Fortunate young gentleman author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 979. The text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun Chapter 974. A storm starts. Zhao Man opened her mouth in surprise and stared at him blankly. Tang Ning explained, "Originally, I sent an envoy to the capital to ask His Majesty to marry you, but His Majesty did not agree. Instead, he made Princess Anyang a princess, and then things became what they are now." Zhao Man was stunned and said, "You mean, Sister Anyang is going to marry you?" Tang Ning said, "On the surface, it is true." You. Zhao Man finally came back to her senses and said angrily, "How can this be? I will go and ask my father to take back his order. It is obviously me who wants to marry." Tang Ning hurriedly pulled her and said, "Won't this make His Majesty suspicious?" Zhao Man sat in his arms aggrieved, lowered her head, and whispered, "It was obviously me who came first, but they didn't follow the order. Now even Sister Anyang has to line up in front of me." Tang Ning sighed softly. He really felt a little guilty towards Zhao Man. This was supposed to be a chance for her to marry in glory, but it was ruined by Emperor Chen. Tang Ning thought about it, looked down at her, and said, "That doesn't count. Even if she married earlier, she has to line up behind you and call you sister." Zhao Man raised her head suddenly and said in surprise, "Really? Tang Ning didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What she cared about was really just the question of who was older and who was younger. If this situation happened to Tang Yaoyao, Tang Ning would have been torn into pieces long ago. Tang Ning accompanied Zhao Man for a while, but in order to avoid criticism, he agreed with her on the time to meet next time and prepared to leave the palace. He walked to the palace gate, and a carriage slowly stopped at the palace gate. King Huai got off the carriage and walked towards the palace gate. After the two greeted each other from a distance, they quickly separated. Zhao Man has returned to Beijing. Tang Ning's last mission in Beijing is to take her away safely, but because of Bai Jin's words, Tang Ning once again focused on King Huai. Back home, Tang Ning temporarily suppressed his suspicion of King Huai, walked into the yard, looked at Princess Anyang sitting in the yard, and asked, "Xiao Man is back, have you visited her in the palace?" "No, no, I'll go see her later." Princess Anyang shook her head, her eyes evasive, looking like a thief. Prince Huai and Prince Fu's family didn't walk far. Tang Ning looked at Princess Anyang and asked, "What kind of person is Prince Huai?" "Prince Huai's brother." Princess Anyang looked at him in surprise and asked, "Why are you asking this?" "Just curious." Tang Ning smiled and said, "He is talented, steady, and mature. There are very few young people like him. Maybe it has something to do with his childhood experience." Princess Anyang shook her head and said, "Concubine Yang died early, and the queen who raised him also died early. He was alone in the palace. I have been bullied a lot, so I have developed my current personality." Princess Anyang rolled her eyes at him after she finished speaking, saying, "You sound like young people are like you. However, you and my brother, the King Huai, are really similar in some ways." Tang Ning asked, "Equally handsome?" Princess Anyang glanced at him and said, "You are very calm in everything you do, and you are confident of victory." Tang Ning himself sometimes does not do things perfectly, but he agrees with Princess Anyang's evaluation of the King Huai. In other words, if he wants to rebel, he may have made all the preparations. The father-in-law of the King Huai is the general of the Right Feather Guard, responsible for half of the defense of the palace. If he joins forces with the Li family, he will be very close to the supreme position. I am afraid that even the Emperor Chen would not have thought that the Emperor's guards responsible for guarding the palace would rebel against him. Although he had guessed the possible actions of the King Huai, Tang Ning always felt that something was wrong. If King Huai really wanted to rebel, then his flaws were too obvious, and such flaws would obviously not appear in a meticulous person like King Huai. Different strategies are needed to deal with different opponents. If King Huai is standing opposite him, Tang Ning must be extremely careful. In the next few days, his eyes were always on King Huai, but King Huai did not make any unusual moves. He just obeyed the order of Emperor Chen and dealt with the end of the Liang Kingdom remnant. Tang Ning's sight was all on King Huai, but just outside his sight, something happened that shocked the capital. The newly appointed assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice wanted to make a good political achievement. He turned over a lot of old cases from the case room, hoping to make some achievements and establish his own majesty in the Ministry of Justice. This Huang Shilang, who was able to sit in the position of Shilang of the Ministry of Justice, was quite capable. He actually solved 2 old cases in a row, entered the public's vision, and became a rising star in the court. This seemed to inspire his fighting spirit even more. He plunged into the case room of the Ministry of Justice without thinking about anything else. Just a few days ago, he actually found another suspicious case. And this case was really a great case. More than 20 years ago, Your Majesty's favorite concubine Yang Fei and the Queen died of illness one after another. Since then, the harem has officially become a situation where the 3 concubines Tang Huifei, Fang Shifei, and Zhang Xianfei are in full control. Especially Tang Huifei, she has been with Your Majesty for the shortest time, but in a short time, she became the uncrowned master of the harem and controlled the harem for 20 years. It was not that no one suspected the cause of death of concubine Yang and the queen, but after an investigation by the Ministry of Justice, their deaths were finally determined to be due to illness. This incident caused quite a stir at the time, but for more than 20 years, no one remembered these things. The new Minister Huang of the Ministry of Justice was also very skilled. He found several officials of the Ministry of Justice 20 years ago and actually collected some clues that were not recorded by the Ministry of Justice. After that, he followed the clues and found an old maid who served the queen at the time. From her mouth, he dug out some secrets that no one knew. When he wrote a memorial about several doubts in the case and handed it over, he already had a lot of clues in his hands, enough to prove that there was another secret behind the death of the queen and concubine Yang. When he wrote a letter to the court requesting that the Ministry of Justice allow the Ministry of Justice to re-investigate the case of the year, the news also leaked out, causing an uproar in the capital. There has never been a shortage of major cases in the capital. In the past 2 years, there have been 2 rebellions by the princes. The people of the capital have long been accustomed to it. However, this major case from more than 20 years ago has only been brought up again now, which has ignited the gossip fire in the hearts of the people of the capital. Although there are only a few words of news leaked from the Ministry of Justice, it is not difficult for the people to imagine a harem drama more than 20 years ago from these few words. After the death of concubine Yang and the queen, concubine Tang Hui has been firmly in the position of concubine Hui since then, dominating the harem. Naturally, she is the biggest beneficiary of this matter. At that time, the Tang family was at its peak of power and seemed to have the ability to murder concubine Yang and the queen. Among them, many people's speculations are even more bold. At that time, the Tang family was in its heyday, and His Majesty had just ascended the throne, and there was no one around him to use, and he could not suppress the remaining forces of several princes in the court at all. Later, with the help of the Tang family, His Majesty cleared all the opposition voices in the court and sat on the throne completely. After that, the status of the Tang family and concubine Tang Hui became higher and higher. After the death of concubine Yang and the queen, concubine Tang Hui completely controlled the harem. Before His Majesty became the emperor, the Tang family could choose more than just His Majesty. Later, it was proved that the Tang family's vision was not wrong. With the help of the Tang family, His Majesty's road to succession was like a god's help. After His Majesty became the emperor, the Tang family also reached a new peak. The Tang family's legitimate daughter became concubine Hui and gave birth to Prince Duan. The Tang family will not do a loss-making business. Among them, could it be that His Majesty and the Tang family reached a deal, and letting concubine Tang Hui become the master of the harem was the condition of this deal? Because this speculation is really bold, even treasonous, the people dare not discuss it openly, but in the dark, one whirlpool after another was rolled up. When a huge whirlpool was rolled up in the capital with the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Justice as its center, Tang Ning stood in the courtyard, looking at the gloomy sky, as if he saw the pair of huge hands stirring up the storm behind the dark clouds. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 980. Chapter 975 of the main text volume of Ruyi Young Master was given the opportunity to build a palace and raise a temple. At this time, there were only Emperor Chen and Prince Fu in the palace. Even Wei Jian was sent out by Emperor Chen, and there were no eunuchs or maids serving him. Emperor Chen's expression was extremely gloomy. He looked at Prince Fu and asked, "Didn't you deal with all the people who knew what happened back then?" Prince Fu looked apologetic and said, "It's all my brother's negligence. Maybe something slipped through the net." "Maybe." Chen Huang shook his hand suddenly and said, "The evidence from the Ministry of Punishment has been piled on my desk, and you still want to tell me maybe?" King Fu buried his head deeper and whispered, it's my fault, please punish me. Penalize you? What's the use of punishing you? Chen Huang glanced at him coldly and said, you go down first, I will handle this matter. Prince Fu bowed and said, my dear brother, please retire. King Fu respectfully withdrew, and Huang Chen slowly sat down in his seat, leaning on the back of the chair. A look of painful reminiscence appeared on his face, and then it turned into a look of murderous intent, and he said in a sinister voice, Che, look who is fanning the flames behind the scenes, I will cut him into pieces. When he said this, his teeth were clenched and his expression was terrifying. He no longer looked as steady and dignified as before. The old royal case from 20 years ago has been circulating in the capital for the past 2 days, but the court has never given a result. The case of concubine Yang and the Empress cannot be re-investigated by the Ministry of Punishment if it wants. This requires the consent of the court, or His Majesty's consent. The lack of movement from His Majesty caused the case to be temporarily shelved. However, the discussion among the people did not stop. Instead, various conspiracy theories evolved, making the situation more and more uncontrollable. In the morning, the Minister of Rights has just submitted a report to discuss the etiquette regulations for Princess Anyang and her husband from the western regions, and has finalized the formal send-off in half a month. The Minister of War reported the battle situation on the grassland. The Black Barbarians have been defeated, and Chen's 100,000-strong army will be reorganized soon. After that, there will be no important court matters to discuss. Just when Wei Jian was about to announce his resignation, a figure stood up from among the officials. The Minister of Punishment held the whiteboard, stood upright in front of everyone, and said, Your Majesty, the Punishment Ministry has investigated and found out that the death of the Queen and concubine Yang more than 20 years ago was mysterious. I sincerely ask Your Majesty to allow the Punishment Ministry to re-investigate. Find out the truth about this case and bring justice to the Queen and concubine Yang. After the Minister of Punishment said these words, the originally noisy court suddenly became quiet. Chen Wang's expression remained calm. He just glanced at the Minister of Punishment, then nodded and said, in that case, I'm sure. The Punishment Department must take this case seriously. If there is even the slightest bit of deception, I will never give you mercy. The Minister of Punishment bowed and said, I obey your order. Emperor Chen gave him a cold look and said, retreat. All officials exited the hall and returned to their respective yamen. In the Ministry of Punishments, Shangshu Yazhong, Song Yi, Shangshu of the Ministry of Punishments, looked at Huang Shilang and said, don't continue investigating this case. Huang Shilang looked up at him and asked, why? Song Yudao, this case is not something you can investigate. Huang Shilang smiled and said, I am the Minister of the Ministry of Punishment, and I am in charge of all the unjust cases in prisons. Is there any case in the world that I cannot investigate? Song Yi looked at him, sighed, and said, I just advise you to stop before it's too late to avoid disaster. Huang Shilang said, Your Majesty said that the Ministry of Punishment should take this case seriously and not be careless in the slightest. How can we stop it? Song Yi looked at him and said, I have already done what I need to do to persuade you, so you can take care of yourself. The newly appointed Minister of the Ministry of Punishment is indeed very capable. In a case that took place more than 20 years ago, he finally found a bunch of clues and completely turned the case over. When it came to the deaths of the Queen and concubine Yang, the Taiyuan Hospital initially concluded that they died of illness, while Huang Shilang of the Ministry of Punishment gave the conclusion that they were poisoned. Not only that, he also found out that the deaths of the Queen and concubine Yang were inseparable from the Tang family and concubine Tang. And this is far from the end. It is said that in addition to the Tang family and Tang Gaifei, there are other murderers in the case, but no matter who he is, he will eventually surface with the investigation of the Ministry of Punishments. The Ministry of Punishment has produced such a capable person, which will serve as a deterrent to those who have the intention to commit crimes within the capital, and will be conducive to the formation of good public security in the capital. However, life is like this, you never know which will come first, tomorrow or the accident. Huang Shilang, who was in the limelight, was demoted from the capital because he had not buttoned a button when he went to the morning court. He was sent to Shazhou in the west and was never allowed to return to the capital. Etiquette issues can be minor issues for officials. As long as your background is strong enough, no one will care about you even if you sleep against a pillar during the morning session. But if we take it seriously, trivial matters such as burping, farting, and unbuttoned buttons are enough to make officials lose their official hat and ruin their career. Obviously, the Minister of Punishment is the latter type. The case that was originally followed up by Huang Shilang was temporarily unhandled due to his transfer of official positions. Song Yi, the Secretary of the Ministry of Justice, came to the Tang mansion today. When he mentioned this matter, he still looked sad. Tang Ning looked at him pretending to be ignorant and asked, "Isn't it a little hasty to convict the Minister of Criminal Affairs of such a serious crime just because he didn't button up his clothes in the morning?" Song Yi shook his head and said, "Master Tang has only been an official for a few years, and he doesn't know the inside story. Ever since Huang Shilang decided to investigate this case, his ending today has been doomed." "Oh," Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Is there any other hidden story in this case?" Song Yudao, "After so many years, no one who wants to interfere in this case has a good end. How can Mr. Huang be spared?" Tang Ning asked in surprise, "How could this happen? Doesn't your Majesty want to find out the deaths of the Queen and concubine Yang?" "Your Majesty." Song Yi just said two words, but suddenly realized something, swallowed what he was going to say again, picked up the teacup and took a sip, and said with a smile, "I'm sorry, I drank a little today." "Too much?" Tang Ning reminded, "Master Song drinks tea." Song Yi said sheepishly, "Xiaoguan doesn't have a good drinking capacity, and he will get drunk even if he drinks tea." The Minister of Justice was deported before he could investigate the case. There were countless speculations about this. However, for Tang Ning, who knew more about the inside story, he already had the answer to this matter. The Tang family and concubine Tang Hui may have been behind the deaths of the Queen and concubine Yang, but they were definitely inseparable from Emperor Chen. But Chen Huang would not admit this matter. Do you want him to admit that he made a deal with the Tang family with the lives of the Queen and concubine Yang in order to secure the throne? Once this case is investigated, it will leave an indelible stigma in the history books to this day. This is also the reason why the Minister of Punishment met this end. It was no secret to Tang Ning, who was standing behind the Minister of Justice. However, from his perspective, he didn't feel that the person had done anything wrong. Thinking about it from his perspective, if it was him who had experienced all this, I'm afraid his methods would be 10 times 100 times more intense. He faced the direction of Prince Huai's mansion and sighed deeply. At the same time, King Huai looked at the palace and said softly, "I gave you a chance." Luan mobile version website. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 981. Huang Shilang of the Ministry of Justice was once considered a rising star in the court. There was never a shortage of officials in the court, but there was a shortage of capable officials like Huang Shilang. However, in officialdom, ability is not the most important thing. Don't you see that in today's court, those incompetent people who are living on their own bodies are still living a more prosperous life than anyone else? If you want to do well in the officialdom, ability only comes second. The most important thing is to have a correct stance. Although Huang Shilang has outstanding abilities, he obviously doesn't have much eyesight. He can't tell that His Majesty doesn't want to thoroughly investigate the old cases, but he insists on going against His Majesty. If he is not demoted, who will be demoted? Ministry of Punishment. When the officials of the Ministry of Justice mentioned Huang Shilang, They all looked regretful. He was originally the person with the brightest future in the Ministry of Justice. He might become a very important figure in the court in his lifetime, but because of this trivial matter that had nothing to do with him, his future was ruined. Song Yi looked at Mr. Huang, who was packing his things, and asked, "Is it worth it?" Huang Shilang looked back at him and said with a smile, "In Xiaoguan's heart, there is no value or not, only the truth." Song Yi shook his head and said, "You still didn't get the truth in the end." Huang Shilang looked at him and asked with a smile, "Do you really think so?" Song Yi looked at the smile on his face and felt a little shocked in his heart. It seems that Huang Shilang has got the answer he wants, but due to his status, he is unable to reveal the answer. In fact, not only him, but also no one in the huge court could reveal this answer. No matter who dares to get involved in the dark history of the royal family, they will end up with the same fate as Huang Shilang. He patted Huang Shilang's shoulder, sighed, and said, "Be careful along the way." Huang Shilang of the Ministry of Punishment was demoted. On the third day after he was transferred from Beijing, he encountered bandits. Several of his followers died one after another, but strangely, Huang Shilang seemed to have evaporated and completely disappeared. With Tang Ning's intelligence ability, she was able to find out that on the same day that Huang Shilang left the capital, several spies also quietly left the capital for an unknown purpose. Maybe Huang Shilang has completely disappeared from this world, or maybe he knew that it would be unlucky to go to Beijing, so he found a place to hide to avoid this disaster. But no matter what, after Huang Shilang, no one dared to mention the taboo topic 20 years ago. Tang Ning was waiting for that person's next move. The matter of Huang Shilang is definitely not the end. It is just the beginning. As an introduction, it has already played its due role. The things that Huang Shilang found out have already flowed into the public. People have different opinions and speculations about this. Those were just guesses at first, but Huang Shilang's next encounter gave many speculations a basis, and things turned towards what Chen Huang least wanted to happen. That direction developed. If all this goes as Tang Ning guessed, then it will be time for King Huai himself to appear. There was just one thing he was confused about. Not to mention that King Huai only had the father-in-law of General Yulin Wei. Even if he controlled the entire Yulin Guard and wanted to rebel, he would undoubtedly be destroying himself. He could occupy the palace, but then what they have to face is the siege from the other 14 guards. From the perspective of King Huai, Tang Ning made many deductions, but none of them succeeded. Unless King Huai wants to die, he will never rebel. Or maybe his purpose was never to be an emperor. Prince Huai's mansion. In an underground secret room. Huang Shilang bowed his hands to King Huai and said, "I've tried my best." King Huai said, "Thank you for your hard work." Huang Shilang sighed softly and asked, "Has His Highness really decided? After taking this step, there is really no way out." King Huai said, "We have already come this far, why not take a few more steps to see what a pity it would be to look back?" Ministry of Punishment. Huang Shilang's departure is a good thing for the entire punishment department. They no longer need to face pressure from above. Who knows whether His Majesty will be angry with the entire punishment department in the end when this matter comes to an end. Although the old case from that year was suppressed, His Majesty could guard against Huang Shilang, but he could not guard against Yu Yu. Not only the people, but also officials from the Ministry of Justice are discussing this matter behind the scenes. It's such a pity, Mr. Huang. Yes, with his ability, it is not impossible for him to sit in the position of Lord Shangshu in the future. Master Huang is too stubborn. How dare we touch this kind of case? You said that Huang Shilang hasn't found anything yet. Didn't His Majesty admit it himself? SHH, keep your voice down, don't you want your head? Several chief officers were discussing quietly in the duty room. One of them raised his hand and saw a figure at the door of the duty room at some unknown time. He immediately got excited and stood up and said, "Why, His Highness King Huai." King Huai nodded, looked at him calmly, and asked, "Is the Minister of Song here?" "Yes, yes." The official nodded and said, "I will go and invite Master Song right now." When Song Yi heard what the chief official said, he smiled bitterly and murmured, "What is supposed to come has come." He always knew in his heart that the person who should and most wanted to investigate the old case from 20 years ago was definitely not Huang Shilang, who was just pursuing the truth, but King Huai. Concubine Yang is the biological mother of King Huai, and the queen is the adoptive mother of King Huai. There may be something fishy about the deaths of the biological mother and the adoptive mother. How could a son of a human being not want to investigate this matter clearly? If this case is not investigated, it will offend King Huai, and if it is investigated, it will offend His Majesty. The criminal department is caught in the middle and is in a dilemma. Song Yi made a decision in his heart and said, "Tell His Highness Prince Huai that I am unwell and have gone home to recuperate." After arranging all this, he slipped out of the back door of the yamen and went straight back to Song Mansion. On the excuse of being ill, he closed the door and thanked guests without seeing anyone. At this time, King Huai also learned about Song Yi's illness from the person in charge. King Huai shook his head and said, "It doesn't matter that Mr. Song is not here. I'm just here to ask how your investigation went on the case of concubine Yang and the Empress that father asked you to investigate thoroughly." When the principal heard this, his heart skipped a beat and sank. Everyone knows that His Majesty said that he would let the Ministry of Punishment conduct a thorough investigation, which was completely contradictory. Huang Shilang listened to His Majesty's words and conducted a thorough investigation. But now, as for others, His Majesty may have sent people to cut them into pieces. Who else from the Ministry of Punishment dares to investigate? But no matter what His Majesty was thinking, he did issue the order for the Ministry of Punishments to conduct a thorough investigation. During this period, His Majesty was recuperating in the palace. King Huai was actually exercising the power of the Prime Minister, so he naturally had the right to intervene in this matter. Case. At this moment, everyone finally understood why Master Shangshu fell ill so quickly. King Huai looked at them and said, "Bring me the files on this case. If you don't check it, I will check it myself." The chief tremblingly went to get the case file, with a horrified expression on his face and a turmoil in his heart. "His Majesty King Huai, this is to offend His Majesty. Maybe there will be another wave of bloodshed in the capital. How come their criminal department is so unlucky that this kind of thing has happened to them?" Huang Shilang left the Ministry of Justice, and the case that should have been shelved was taken over by King Huai himself. When this news came out from the Ministry of Justice, it caused a considerable earthquake in the capital. After the Huang Shilang incident, everyone in the capital knew that His Majesty did not want anyone to investigate this case further, and those who wanted to disobey His Majesty would pay a very serious price. However, at this time, King Huai bucked the trend and completely took over the case. He had a reason to do this. Concubine Yang and the Queen were his biological and adoptive mothers. How could he pretend that nothing had happened? Although he is King Huai, standing opposite him is his father, the current His Majesty. One can imagine what fate will befall King Huai. The royal palace, the Yangtze Temple. When Emperor Chen heard some news, he smashed the jade cup containing ginseng soup and said in a dark voice, "Let him come to the palace to see me."